The Art of Silence. To my beautiful wife Cheryl. When all voices fade, and only your breath remains, may you find in that sacred quiet the path that leads you home. Forward. In an age where the world has become louder than the human heart, silence has turned into a forgotten art. Not the silence of empty rooms or closed mouths, but the deeper silence, the one that lives beneath thought, beneath emotion, beneath the restless noise of the world. This silence once guided humanity. Today it is almost extinct. For the past 2 centuries, human beings have lived in a state of accelerating stimulation. It began with the machinery of the first industrial revolution, continued through the mechanical age, and reached its peak in the digital era, a time when every second is filled with screens, alerts, algorithms, and 1,000 invisible demands pulling at the mind. Humanity learned to adapt to noise, but in doing so, it lost its ability to hear itself. This book, The Art of Silence, exists because the modern human being is drowning. Not in water but in information. Not in chaos but in stimulation. Not in fear but in a relentless, mechanical rhythm that never stops. We no longer suffer from the absence of sound, we suffer from the absence of inner quiet. Every revolution humanity survived, industrial, mechanical, digital, came with a price. But the digital revolution took the greatest toll. It severed the connection between the human mind and its own inner universe. The constant glow of the screen replaced the gentle glow of intuition. The noise of networks replaced the wisdom of solitude. The artificial replaced the natural. And in this process, the human being became a stranger to themselves. This book ties directly to my previous works, After the Internet, Notes from the Human Future, and the Digital Society, How We Lost Faith in the Age of Screens. In those books, I explored what happens when the external systems collapse. But this book asks a different question. What happens when the internal system collapses? When the human being loses access to silence itself? Because without silence, there is no depth. Without silence, there is no clarity. Without silence, there is no inner truth. Without silence, there is no connection to the unseen guidance that once shaped the greatest thinkers, reformers, and messengers throughout history. This book is not religious. It is not cultural. It is not spiritual in a symbolic sense. It is universal because silence is universal. Long before language, culture, doctrine, or ideology, human beings found meaning in stillness. Every great breakthrough in human history, every moment of clarity, every moral awakening, began in a moment of deep, unbroken silence. Inside the darkness of solitude, truth reveals itself. Inside silence, the mind returns to its original strength. Inside silence, the heart speaks its honest language. Inside silence, the human being remembers who they are. Today we live in a world where silence is feared. People run from it. They fill every quiet moment with screens, noise, entertainment, or distraction. They have forgotten that silence is the foundation of a healthy mind, the place where thoughts are purified, emotions are organized, and the internal compass resets itself. This book is a reminder. A call to return. A guide for those who feel lost, overwhelmed, disconnected, or drained by the world around them. A companion for those who know something is missing in their lives but cannot name it. In these pages, you will find science, psychology, philosophy, and stories, woven together to reveal a truth that humanity once understood instinctively. A human being who cannot access silence cannot access themselves. The world will not slow down for us. But we can slow down within ourselves. We can rebuild the missing bridge between the mind, heart, and soul. We can restore the lost intelligence that awakens only in silence. We can reclaim the inner voice that modern life buried. This book begins with silence, but it does not end there. It leads to clarity, to healing, to reconnection, to rebirth, to the rediscovery of the human being beneath the noise. Welcome to the Art of Silence. May these pages help you hear what the world tried to silence within you. Dedication. This book is dedicated to the resilient souls of Gaza, who, amidst the noise of war, conflict, and suffering, have found peace through inner silence. To those who have turned inward, seeking connection with God Almighty, and discovered a sanctuary of calm and wisdom within their hearts, even when the world around them was chaotic and unrelenting. To those who have chosen peace over violence, who have transformed fear, anger, and oppression into reflection, prayer, and quiet strength. To those who, by embracing inner silence, have willingly stepped away from the distractions and demands of modern society, finding clarity, purpose, and spiritual resilience in solitude. This book honors your courage, your patience, and your unwavering commitment to listen, reflect, and grow despite overwhelming challenges. May your example inspire all who seek meaning, calm, and wisdom in a world too often dominated by noise, haste, and conflict. Preface. There are moments in every age when humanity must pause and listen, not to the world, but to itself. Our time is one of constant noise, notifications, screens, opinions, demands, and distractions that never rest. We have built a world that speaks endlessly, yet says very little. A world where silence has become a rare luxury, and inner peace feels like a distant memory. But silence is more than the absence of sound. It is a return to clarity, to purpose, to the original design of the human soul. This book began as a question: what happens to the human heart and mind when the world becomes too loud to hear its own truth? It grew into a journey through history, psychology, spirituality, and personal stories, exploring how inner silence has shaped prophets, thinkers, and ordinary people alike. And it became a companion to my earlier works, after the internet and the digital society, extending their message into a quieter, deeper realm, the realm of the self. In writing this book, I was continually drawn to those who embody silence under the harshest conditions. None more so than the people of Gaza, whose resilience and spiritual strength became a guiding compass for this work. Their ability to find calm in prayer, reflection, and inner communication with God, even amidst destruction, reminded me that silence is not weakness. It is power. It is resistance. It is survival. True silence is a sanctuary no oppressor can reach. A horizon no wall can block. A freedom no injustice can extinguish. This book is not a manual for meditation, or a modern self-help guide. It is an exploration of the art of inner silence, the silence the messengers of God sought when they retreated into mountains, caves, and night. The silence that allows wisdom to bloom. The silence that reveals truth when noise tries to bury it. You will find stories, reflections, metaphors, and moments of raw honesty. Some come from history, some from imagination, and some from the depths of human experience. They exist to guide you gently toward the quiet place within yourself, a place you may have forgotten, a place that still waits for you. If there is one message I wish every reader to take away, it is this. Silence is not the escape from life. It is the return to life. A return to the heart, to the soul, and to the source who created both. May this book offer you not just words but space. Not just knowledge but calm. Not just ideas but an invitation to listen, to feel, and to rediscover the quiet wisdom that has always lived inside you. Introduction: The Age of Noise. A world lost in external sound. Humanity did not lose itself in one night. It happened slowly, quietly, without warning, the way a person can live for years without noticing they have stopped breathing deeply. The world around us became louder, faster, more demanding, while something inside us grew quieter, smaller, and finally, almost invisible. We are living in the noisiest era in human history. Not the noise of traffic, machines, or crowds, though those are everywhere. This is a different kind of noise, the psychological noise that never stops. A constant inner vibration created by devices, notifications, lights, thoughts, anxieties, expectations, and the digital pressure of a world that never sleeps. This is the age where silence has become unnatural. Where inner stillness feels uncomfortable. Where solitude is feared more than chaos. Where human beings crave stimulation the way thirsty men crave water, without realizing the water is poison. This book begins here, in this age of noise, because this is the place where humanity forgot something essential. A human being cannot hear truth without silence. When the mind is overstimulated, truth becomes blurred. When the heart is crowded, emotions become distorted. When the body is exhausted, the inner signals shut down. When the soul is buried under noise, it becomes unreachable. We think we are overwhelmed by life. But we are actually overwhelmed by noise, the invisible toxin of the digital era. A toxin so normal that people forget it exists. Noise is no longer something outside of us. It has become something inside us, living under the skin, ruminating in the brain, pulsing in the nervous system. Modern humans carry noise the way older generations carried oxygen. It has become part of daily survival, yet it is the very thing destroying the inner world of the human being. The industrial silence collapse. The first collapse of silence began with machinery. Factories replaced fields. Schedules replaced seasons. Alarms replaced natural waking. Work rhythms replaced human rhythms. Humanity learned to adapt, but something was already broken. The digital collapse. Then came the final blow. Screens replaced faces. Noise replaced thought. Information replaced wisdom. Connectivity replaced connection. Artificial stimulation replaced natural emotion. The digital world took the last untouched space humans had, their inner world, and filled it with noise. So much noise that people now panic when they experience true silence, because silence exposes what noise has been hiding. Fatigue, emptiness, confusion, unresolved pain, unfulfilled desires, unprocessed memories, and truths we tried to bury under stimulation. The psychological breakdown. Humanity today is not stressed, it is overstimulated. Humanity today is not depressed, it is internally dehydrated. Humanity today is not weak, it is disconnected from its original operating system. Modern psychology tries to solve these issues with labels and pills. Medicine tries to numb the symptoms. Entertainment tries to distract the mind. Society tries to accelerate the pace of life. But the cure is older than civilization. Silence. Not silence as avoidance. Not silence as meditation ritual. Not silence as discipline. Silence as nature intended, the internal quiet that activates the deeper human intelligence. The inner reset. The restoration of clarity. The reconnection to the part of the self that modern life has buried. Why this book matters now. Humanity is reaching a turning point. People feel fractured inside. They feel disconnected from meaning. Their thoughts are scattered. Their emotions are unstable. Their decisions lack clarity. Their relationships feel shallow. Their inner world feels abandoned. This book is written because silence is no longer optional, it is necessary for survival. Without silence, the human mind collapses. Without silence, the heart becomes numb. Without silence, the soul becomes unreachable. This is not philosophy. This is not religion. This is human necessity. The purpose of this book. This book will guide the reader through how silence was lost. How silence shapes human psychology. How silence activates inner intelligence. How overstimulation destroys emotional balance. How to reclaim silence in a world engineered to steal it. And how the future of humanity depends on the rediscovery of inner quiet. Alongside the explanations, you will meet fictional characters whose stories reflect real human struggles in the age of noise. Through them, readers will feel the emotional truth of what silence can heal. This introduction is a warning and a doorway. A warning that humanity stands on the edge of inner collapse. And a doorway into the quiet place that still exists inside every human being, waiting to be reopened. This is the age of noise. But it does not have to be the age of human decline. Inside silence, the lost human returns. Chapter 1: The First Disconnection. When machines replaced human rhythm. The year was 1812. Smoke from the first factories drifted over small towns, covering the sky in a thin gray veil. Children who once woke to the songs of birds now woke to the deafening clatter of spinning wheels and pounding hammers. Men and women, whose work had followed the rhythm of the sun, found themselves enslaved to the rhythm of machines. In a small village, Arlen, a young man of 17, watched the new factory rise at the edge of the field. The sound of the engines was relentless, vibrating through the earth into his chest. For the first time, he noticed a strange emptiness inside himself, a quiet voice that had once spoken to him while walking in the forest or listening to the wind through the trees. It had vanished. This was the first disconnection, not from people but from the inner self. Humans had become participants in a machine-like world, and the human rhythm had been overwritten. Work, productivity, and noise replaced reflection, stillness, and listening to the heart. Arlen tried to resist. At night, he would walk into the woods, hoping to find the quiet he once knew. But the echo of the machines followed him, persistent even in the shadows. Sleep came reluctantly. Thoughts raced. His mind, once clear and fluid, now moved in jagged, mechanical patterns, imitating the rhythm of the factory that governed his days. The Industrial Revolution promised progress, wealth, and opportunity. But it demanded something in return: the human capacity for silence, the inner pause that allowed thought to deepen, emotion to settle, and intuition to speak. Little by little, the world stole it. Psychologically, this was the beginning of an internal mutation. Humans were forced to live in constant external noise. Their minds learned to adapt to the mechanical tempo, but their inner awareness was dulled. The neurons responsible for reflection and subtle thought began to lie dormant. Emotional depth suffered. Awareness of self became fragmented. Stories like Arlen's were repeated in thousands of villages and cities. Families could no longer sit quietly together. Meals were eaten while listening to the hum of machines. Nights, once sacred for dreaming and reflection, became spaces haunted by fatigue and mechanical echoes. Silence, the quiet space where humans once listened to themselves, disappeared. By the end of this first era, a pattern had emerged that would define the next 2 centuries. External noise increases. Inner silence decreases. Human clarity becomes a rare gift. Arlen did not know it yet, but this pattern would accelerate. The next stages, chemical, digital, and psychological, would strip away even more layers of human quiet. What had begun with the pounding of factory wheels was only the first step in a long journey toward total disconnection from the self. Yet, even in that first darkness, the human mind showed resilience. In the woods, Arlen felt fleeting moments of clarity, small flashes where the inner voice whispered. It reminded him of what had been lost. The seed of awareness was still alive. And it is this seed, the human ability to hear oneself, that this book will cultivate. Because no matter how loud the world becomes, the inner voice can be awakened again. It requires nothing more than attention, patience, and the courage to step away from the noise. The first industrial revolution taught humanity one lesson: noise destroys the inner world faster than any external threat. And once destroyed, the inner world cannot heal itself without deliberate retreat into silence. Chapter 2: The Mechanical Mind. How industry turned humans into functions. By the mid-1800s, the industrial towns had grown into humming giants of iron and smoke. Life followed the cadence of pistons, gears, and conveyor belts. Every human movement was timed, measured, and optimized. People were no longer individuals thinking, feeling, and breathing naturally; they were functions, cogs in a massive machine whose purpose existed outside themselves. Ilara, a factory worker in Manchester, noticed it first in subtle ways. Her thoughts no longer wandered freely; they raced along the strict timelines of her shifts. Her dreams became fragmented, replaced by the echo of machinery even in the quiet of her small room. Conversations with neighbors shrank to quick exchanges about tasks and orders. She began to realize something unsettling: the world demanded obedience, but it took her inner awareness in return. Psychologically, humans were being trained to live externally. Attention, once fluid and reflective, was now conditioned to respond to external stimuli. Memory became practical and task-oriented. Imagination diminished. Emotional depth was compressed into the brief moments between labor. The human mind, while capable of great things, was being repurposed for efficiency, and in the process, its most vital capacity, self-reflection, was quietly erased. This was the birth of the mechanical mind, a brain adapted for speed, routine, and output rather than introspection, understanding, or moral awareness. Arlen's village had already begun to show symptoms of this new era. Children were taught to follow orders without question. Adults could barely remember the sensation of walking alone in the forest or listening to the wind without distraction. Even love, friendship, and curiosity were measured against usefulness. Ilara felt the weight of this change in her chest. There was a subtle ache she could not name, a missing sense that life had once held. In fleeting moments of solitude, she remembered stories her grandmother told, tales of nights spent beneath stars, listening to the world in its quiet pulse. Those nights had awakened dreams, fears, questions, and insight. Now, the stars were invisible behind smoke and rooftops, and the world had lost its quiet voice. Modern neuroscience would later explain what Ilara and countless others experienced intuitively. The human brain requires periods of stillness to process emotion, integrate memory, and strengthen decision-making. Constant external noise, enforced routines, and overstimulation inhibit this natural process, leaving humans prone to anxiety, shallow thinking, and emotional fragmentation. In this age, the mechanical mind thrived at the cost of the inner self. Productivity increased, but consciousness became shallow. Society praised efficiency while the individual lost the ability to pause, to reflect, to listen to the subtle signals of their own body and mind. Yet even in this mechanical world, fragments of inner life persisted. Ilara noticed small signs, a fleeting image of the forest, a memory of laughter, a pause in her heartbeat when she touched a soft object or listened to the rain. These fragments, though faint, were evidence that the human spirit, though pressured and bent, had not broken completely. The lesson of the mechanical mind is stark and clear: external progress, no matter how impressive, can silently erode the inner world of the human being. Efficiency may drive the economy, but it shrinks the space where thought, feeling, and awareness reside. Humanity learned to survive in this new world, but at a cost. The mind had become a machine, and the machine had begun to replace the self. Chapter 3: The Digital Storm. The overstimulated human brain. By the early 21st century, humanity had entered a new era, the digital age. Unlike the mechanical age, where noise was tangible, the pounding of wheels, the hissing of steam, the noise of this age was invisible, omnipresent, and relentless. It arrived in the form of screens, notifications, social media, emails, and the constant hum of digital information. Talia, a young professional in a bustling city, felt it first in her mornings. Her alarm rang at 6:30 a.m., immediately followed by the glow of her phone screen. News alerts flashed. Messages arrived. Social media scrolled endlessly, demanding attention. She reached for her coffee, but her mind was already exhausted, racing through tasks, obligations, and information she hadn't yet asked for. This was the digital storm, a perfect acceleration of the mechanical mind. The human brain, adapted for centuries to periods of stillness, was now flooded with data. Dopamine-driven notifications triggered compulsive attention. The mind had no opportunity to rest, reflect, or process emotion. Decisions were no longer measured or deliberate, they were reactive, impulsive, and externally guided. Psychologically, the consequences were severe. Talia began to notice that she could not focus for more than a few minutes without distraction. Emotional sensitivity diminished. Anxiety became constant background noise. Deep thinking was replaced by surface-level engagement. Sleep was shallow, fragmented by the glow of screens. Her inner voice, the quiet guide she once trusted, was now drowned out. In countless households and offices, a pattern emerged: humans connected to each other digitally, yet disconnected from themselves. Communities existed online, but people no longer felt connection in reality. Skills of reflection, patience, and insight atrophied. The brain, like a muscle, weakened without rest, and neurons responsible for calm, clarity, and moral judgment became dormant. Stories like Talia's were repeated in millions of variations worldwide. Children born after 2000 often never knew quiet. Even in natural spaces, their attention was fragmented. Birds, rivers, forests, all faded into the background of digital stimulation. Solitude became unbearable. Silence triggered discomfort, anxiety, and restlessness. This overstimulation created a society addicted to noise. The brain, overwhelmed by constant input, sought more input to feel alive. External digital stimuli replaced internal awareness. Humans could no longer hear the subtle signals of their body, the rhythm of their mind, or the voice of their heart. Yet within this storm, small sparks of resistance appeared. Some individuals experimented with digital fasting, solitude, and conscious stillness. They discovered, often with amazement, that the world did not collapse when they turned off their devices. Their thoughts cleared. Their emotions stabilized. Their inner voices returned. This is the paradox of the digital storm. It is simultaneously the greatest threat and the greatest opportunity. For the first time in history, humans were faced with the choice to surrender completely to artificial rhythms, or to reclaim the inner silence that had guided every great human insight before the era of screens. The digital storm revealed a hard truth: the human race had never been more connected, yet more disconnected. Minds were linked through networks, but hearts remained isolated. Knowledge increased, but wisdom stagnated. Action was constant, but reflection vanished. Silence, once a natural part of life, became revolutionary. In this era, the art of hearing oneself became a skill so rare that only those willing to consciously step away from the noise could access it. The digital storm had arrived, and with it, the final test of humanity's capacity to remain human. Chapter 4: When the Inner Voice Goes Silent. The psychological breakdown of modern humanity. The digital storm did more than fill lives with noise, it buried the inner voice that had guided humanity for millennia. This voice, subtle and often overlooked, is the navigator of thought, the compass of emotion, and the bridge between mind and heart. Without it, humans move blindly through life, reacting to the external world while losing touch with themselves. Liam, a software engineer, discovered this truth the hard way. His life was a series of obligations and notifications, meetings, emails, scrolling, responding. At first, he considered the constant stimulation normal, even productive. But gradually, he began to feel hollow. Decisions, once clear and deliberate, became mechanical. Joy no longer came from life itself, only from the fleeting buzz of a notification. Anxiety whispered in the gaps between tasks, but Liam barely noticed it, because he was always distracted. Psychology calls this overstimulation or information fatigue. But the reality is deeper. The inner voice, the quiet guide that integrates experience, emotion, and intuition, cannot compete with endless external input. When it is ignored for too long, it retreats, leaving humans emotionally fragmented, mentally exhausted, and spiritually depleted. Modern humans are often prescribed quick fixes, medications to suppress symptoms, therapy to analyze behavior, or digital entertainment to distract the mind. Yet these solutions do not restore the inner voice, they mask its absence. The deeper intelligence, the subtle self-awareness, the quiet moral compass, all remain muted. Even basic life functions are affected. Sleep becomes shallow because the brain never shuts down. Creativity diminishes because imagination cannot flourish in a constant digital environment. Memory falters because the mind no longer processes experiences deeply. Decisions become reactive rather than reflective. Humans begin to trust algorithms, external authorities, or synthetic inputs more than their own internal guidance. Consider Mia, a college student born into the digital era. She could solve complex mathematical problems, navigate social networks, and multitask with skill. But she could not remember the last time she had a thought without distraction. She could not feel her emotions without immediately reaching for her phone. She could not sit quietly without discomfort. Her inner voice was silent, not because it had vanished, but because she had never been allowed to listen to it. The consequences of this silence are profound. Emotional fragmentation, people feel disconnected from their own feelings. Cognitive overload, the brain becomes reactive, not reflective. Loss of intuition, decisions feel hollow, even if they appear logical. Moral numbness: without quiet reflection, values become externalized. Spiritual disconnect: a subtle but real loss of connection to purpose, meaning, and the unseen forces that guide human life. Yet the inner voice is not lost forever. Like a dormant seed, it waits beneath the noise, ready to awaken when the external world is turned down, and the human being allows themselves space to listen. This awakening is not instant. It requires deliberate retreat. It requires resisting the allure of constant external input. It requires returning to the natural rhythm of thought, emotion, and awareness. History shows us that the greatest human insights always emerged from silence. Every philosopher, thinker, scientist, and messenger of truth retreated into quiet spaces. Jesus prayed in solitude. Socrates walked and reflected alone. Leonardo sketched in his studio undisturbed. These were not acts of withdrawal, they were acts of inner cultivation. Silence was their laboratory, the place where the inner voice could speak freely. For modern humanity, the challenge is greater. The noise is relentless. The temptation to distract oneself is constant. Yet the principle remains unchanged: inner silence is the foundation of clarity, creativity, morality, and wisdom. Without it, humans drift. With it, they awaken.